Hi, welcome to State of the Mist podcast. This is our first episode. My name is Kriv,
Hey, I'm Salamander.
and we're some friends who decided to get a podcast started just talking about World vs. World, its current state, and what's going well, what's going not so well. And we can just start talking about ourselves a little bit. Salamander, why don't you go ahead?
All right. Yeah, so I've been playing the game a little bit since like a little bit before Heart of Thorns. Um Played World versus World very casually back then. Back when I think it was Edge of the Mist was alive and well. That was actually the only map I ran around on. Came back to the game a few years back after Path of Fire because life hits, college and everything. And then found new. The guild that we're both in, Griff's actually the guild leader. I started commanding for new and making world versus world guides, and yeah, it's been great since.
And myself, I'm leader of the new guild. I kind of really haven't played many other MMOs. I just started in Guild Wars 1, Guild Wars 2, and went from just playing by myself and ignoring everyone else to slowly getting into World vs. World and actually learning how the game works, and then starting a guild to try to help other people get their feet wet and get better in World vs. World. And yeah, why don't we kind of do a little intro for people that are just getting into Guild Wars 2 and more specifically World vs. World.
Okay. Do you want me to start on that?
Yeah, go ahead. I know we've got the Steam launch that just happened, so there'll be a lot of new people coming in that don't know what it is.
Yeah, there have actually been a few players who aren't familiar with World versus World and don't know it exists. I actually spoke to a friend recently who said she used to play Guild Wars 2. She played it for like a year, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. Are you ever going to come back to the game?" You know, like I actually World versus World a lot, and she's like, "I have no idea what World versus World is." And yeah, for someone who played for about a year, to never have heard of World versus World, uh, I feel like the game doesn't do too much when it comes to introducing new players to this large scale PvP thing. People are familiar with PvP and they see the PvP tab at the top, but they don't, move one button over and look at World versus World. Or if they do see it, they just click on it, see a bunch of maps. Um, or, if you're under level 31, you don't have any characters over that level. That's just going to be completely grayed out. You won't be able to click on it. So if you're brand new to the game, you may be completely lost when it comes down to trying to find different types of PvP because it's not just the structured PvP. We do have world versus world, and it's not a neglected game mode at all. But there are players who come in and just never step foot in the mists.
That's so true, yeah. I think people might step into structured PvP first and then maybe get disappointed at how toxic it is
Oh
or
yeah.
the meta or whatnot, and they don't even know there's a whole nother game mode that is player versus player, but in a much larger, more fun, I think, scale. That was actually one of the reviews I saw on Steam yesterday. That was one of their main points is that the World vs. World of Guild Wars 2 is not something you can find in any other game, not even remotely close to that level.
Yeah, definitely not. There was an old MMO I played, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago called it was I think a Korean game called Battle of the Immortals. They had something that was almost like a realm versus realm, but it was more like um, three guilds or five guilds or something that were up against each other, and you needed to like it was a pay to win game, so it was extremely off balanced. There was like a guild that would have all of the pay to win players, and these like they're against these two other guilds that are casual players who just happen to match up against them, and it would be horrible. I'm so glad that World versus World and Guild Wars is a thing. It's so much more balanced than other games when you think of the horizontal progression as opposed to vertical progression. Everything stop like the stats stop at ascended gear. And for the new players listening, ascended gear isn't that much better than exotic gear, and it's not that hard to obtain.
Right. You can literally walk in with a level 80 character and buy exotic gear off the trade post and be ready to go. There's
Oh
there's
yeah.
really not a lot you have to do to prepare. But yeah, it is realm versus realm, I guess, is what it's called in a wider sense or in other games, where you have a whole server, a whole kingdom of, hundreds of people that are fighting against two other servers that are all active 24 hours a day, killing and getting points and taking castles and going back and forth with siege weapons and massive battles. And it's fun. It's very engaging, and it's got a lot of subculture to it, and different competing interests, and it's just a whole world within itself.
Oh yeah. I didn't even think of the fact that it went. I mean, it goes 24/7. When I was referring to the other game, um, it was not 24/7. It was like once a month for I think like 30 minutes. So yeah, nothing compares to this. And like you said, the subculture behind it, um, you know, there's some conflict between those who identify as just World v Worlders and just PvEers, and those who just PvP. I wouldn't say conflict actually, just like very different in the way they approach the game, how they see the game, and the direction they want to see different classes go in.
Yeah, that is true. And the PvE community is much bigger and much more vocal, and that's what you're going to see on the forums and
Oh
the
yeah.
Reddit, and et cetera, et cetera. But the world versus world community, I'd say, is even more diehard and committed and into the game mode. There just aren't as many of them out there, and not as visible.
Yeah, definitely. Like the ones you notice are the loudest, and that's definitely the PvE community. And I'm not bashing the PvE community. I do PvE a lot, so
Yeah, and there's plenty of overlap. A lot of people do both, and or used to PvE a lot and switch to more world versus world,
yeah.
whatever the case may be. But there's definitely a different mindset from kind of the initial open world, play whatever you want, and you can still make it work, versus in world versus world, where that's really not so much the case. You do have to kind of put some thought into your build, and cover specific roles, or it's not going to go so well.
Yeah, that is very hard to do. I only see that happen every so often, and that's only because you know, when there are new updates, some people who are familiar with the game mode and familiar with different builds and what other builds can do, they'd be able to maybe uh play around with certain characters and form something up that works in certain niches, but may not work in other places. Some PvE players may come into world versus world full berserkers with let's say a dragon hunter, and their raid builds come in with almost no stability, like what one stun break if they bring stand your ground, and yeah, so that's one of the issues moving into world versus world is new players will come in and be immediately discouraged, thinking that this is a extremely difficult game mode. And I'm not saying it's easy. You come across a platinum player as someone who's level 1 with not even gliding, uh, and get one shot. That's going to happen, but it shouldn't be something that discourages players when there are you know helpful players, helpful guides. There's Guild Wars 2 Myths um, that provides like meta uh, roaming or large scale builds. There are resources out there for new players. So yeah.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, I think that's just kind of glossed over, or ignored by a lot of people. Like people will, if they're going to do fractals, if they're going to do raids, yeah, they're going to look up some resources, they're going to see some videos, find out what builds are expected, and go with that. But in World versus World, it's kind of a free for all, and it's much more random people showing up with little understanding of the game, trying to throw together some traits, and then wondering why it didn't work.
Yeah.
But the one of the key aspects I like in World vs. World is that it really pushes you to teamwork in a way a lot of the other game modes don't, because you really have to be aware of what your teammates are doing on a small and bigger scale and kind of work along with that, or the other team's going to win.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's one thing I wanted to bring up sometime, because we do have people that come to the Saturday runs when I tag up who refuse to join Discord. So it'll look like we have 45 in the squad, right? But then 15 people are sitting out of Discord in sub one, not in comped groups. And when our group moves, they stay behind or run off and immediately die. So those are places on the map, especially when we there's a map queue. Those are spots on the map that could go to players who actually contribute. And I understand not everyone can join Discord, but um, it's not that difficult to at least stay on tag.
Right, right. And there's different levels of engagement you can have with the group and the map, but yeah, with competitive play and large fights and movement and all that, really, really, you do need some voice communication for that reaction time, or the other team who does have that is gonna have a big advantage.
Yeah. And there are some people who join Discord that don't necessarily run alongside us. Like we'll have a ranger scouting, letting us know where enemy groups are and stuff. So we'll keep him in a separate group. Um and that's perfectly fine. He stays in Discord so that he knows our next moves. Um he's not contributing to the fights, but he is contributing to our strategy, making sure that we're up to date on what's happening 5 minutes across the map or even on another map.
Right, right. It's a complex game mode, and there's a lot of ways to contribute beyond just, brawling and fighting, as some people are not inclined to do.
Yeah,
So yeah, you can totally contribute with scouting and sieging and different things like that.
yeah. I was gonna say there are some amazing scouts on Darkhaven, like doing the Lord's work out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned Darkhaven. I guess that's another thing we can talk about. The the experience and the culture and what you're going to see in map chat and in the actual play is going to vary quite a bit depending on what server you are on.
Yeah,
And
and paired with.
yeah, yeah. So there's a rotation every 2 months that's going to change that out, and so different static groups of people mixed with different static groups of people, and it's just going to be maybe more toxic on one side, or another server might be more into defending structures, while another one might be more into just brawling in the open field, nonstop fights.
Oh yeah, definitely. You see that a lot uh when you are paired with more, I guess, independent servers. I'll just use Maguma for an example, just because they're one of the larger servers uh, that usually sit around T1. When we pair with them, they seem to not like very much of the more organized groups who are avoiding things like SMC or anything EBG. Um, yeah, you get a lot of uh, I guess hate from certain players on those maps. I mean, on those servers. But when you pair with servers that have guilds that help each other out, I guess, you get more of a friendly community with them. Not to say that Maguma is 100% toxic. There are some great players on Maguma, made some good friends on that server. But there are some servers that have more guilds that are more willing to cooperate with other guilds, or you know the um the scouts and everything assist each other.
Yeah, very different experience, and that kind of leads into restructuring and the whole beta experience that we just had. And so, I guess in a nutshell, we can kind of talk about that. But talking about the current state of the mists, quote unquote,
Yeah,
everybody's divided up into servers. On the North American side, we have, oh man, actually, I don't know right now. It's 4 tiers of 3 teams that are fighting each other all the time. So 12 total. And each of those is linked, so that makes it 24
24
total.
servers. Okay.
Making me do math, yeah. And then the EU folks have an extra 5th tier, so there's even more. And they're divided up by language a bit. So those are just kind of static servers. You're assigned one when you join the game. If you want to switch, it costs gems from 500 to 2,000, different costs depending on how full that server is you're going to. And then that's who you're playing with. And that's kind of part of the appeal because it's a static group. It's the same however many, 100, 200, 300, we don't really know, amount of people.
Yeah.
And then within those servers are guilds, the actual guilds that the game is about. Player formed guilds that play together and train together and fight together over the span of months and years. And that sense of community in World vs. World guilds, I feel, is really cool. And it's not something you see in just your average PvE collecting, miscellaneous guild.
Yeah, no. I think a lot of the community comes from the fact that we do share a common goal. And that's to, well, in our case, it's usually to win fights and to defend like keeps and towers that we have and things like that.
Yeah, that's, I mean, the experience in guilds makes World vs. World. If you're just wandering around by yourself, it's not really, you haven't really experienced it yet. Like that was what changed it for me, going just playing by myself and hitting on gates versus joining a guild and playing with a group of people that I play with on the regular. That's what really made it fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was one thing that changed World versus World for me. I loved it before, back in Edge of the Mist where commander tags didn't exist. You'd put a target over the commander's head and just follow a dot around. And then I went from that to joining new and you know finding out there's this whole other side to world versus world that's way more competitive and way more fun when you get to make friends while doing it. Yeah, that just completely changed the game mode for me. I used to do it very casually. I'd go into world versus world for, I don't know, an hour every few days. Uh, like when I first started. Um, that's even if I was in the mood for it. But now, now that I have a guild to run around with, a bunch of friends, it's so much more fun to get into.
Definitely. Yeah, and the servers, I mean, the game has just hit 10 years old. So
Yeah,
a lot of people that have been playing from launch have been playing on that server for literally 10 years. So there's longtime communities that have kind of formed and fell apart because, guilds do have the option to transfer to another server, although they do have to
yeah,
pay the gem cost. So that is caused kind of some population imbalance over time where some servers are always way overpopulated, some are way underpopulated, or some might be good on one time zone and not another. So that's where this idea of restructuring is coming in, which I feel is really long overdue.
oh yeah,
And I mean, there's a lot of grief and discontent about, as promised years ago, whatever. But they're finally getting to it, so no reason to harp on that.
yeah. I didn't know that the restructuring was going to be a thing until about maybe a year ago when they started talking about it with End of Dragons. And I was amazed with the idea of the alliances because it seemed like, so it's, we talk about community and community within a guild, but there's also community within a server. There are conflicts on servers, and when you're able to choose your alliance and who's in the alliance, that kind of strengthens the community you have, especially if there's more conversations going around and more conflict resolution out there. And I feel like there will be better outcomes with coordination when the alliances fully roll out, just because you're able to bring in a huge group of friends. You have certain friend groups and friend groups merge. Like that's how I kind of see alliances.
Exactly. We have more options to play with our friends versus in the future restructuring system versus now your friend might be on another server and you can't play with them unless somebody pays, 1800 gems.
Yeah.
So that's not a good experience, I don't think.
Yeah, no.
But this will what it's looking like with the restructure is that instead of just these static servers from 10 years ago that are what they are and you can't escape unless you pay money, we'll have the chance to form groups of multiple guilds that are alliances, and then those guilds that want to work together will be placed on the same team. So there'll be an ongoing chance to kind of build those alliances between guilds, more teamwork within people that want to work together, and bringing in other players that want to join that without a huge gem cost that would just push a lot of people away from that opportunity to play together.
Yeah, that'll make it a lot easier for like you said, friends that want to play together. When I got a lot of my PvE friends into World versus World, I got a lot of them to use their server transfers, to use gold, helped a few save up for their transfers, and yeah, it was worth it. And it's gonna be way better when people don't have to worry about the gold costs, the gem costs, or any of that.
Yeah, it's just not an easy way to get people into the game mode. I mean, you just go in and play with a bunch of strangers, and you can't go and play with your friends because you don't want to put a bunch of money into it. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's no other game mode makes you do that. Imagine if you had to pay 1800 gems to play fractals or raids with your game. No
Oh
one
my
would do
gosh. Yeah, no, someone in map chat was talking about that. So a new player in, I don't know, I don't remember which map I was on. but they're like, "Hey, do these servers really matter? Because I think I chose the wrong one. My friends are on this one." And I was like, "Yeah, no, those don't matter unless you're playing world versus world." And they're like, "Okay, cool. What's world versus world?"
Yeah, and they did matter at one point. I do remember way back at launch, your server did determine who was in your PvE as well. But they merged all the PvE servers years ago, so everyone plays together in PvE regardless.
Yeah, I think the only separation is between NA and EU, right?
I believe that's still a gap. Yeah, just due to
Yeah,
ping and things.
yeah. I wouldn't mind going against some EU servers someday, but I heard their world versus world is a lot different. So
I've heard that too. Yeah, I've never played on EU, but everybody seems to say that it's much more strict and organized and structured. And
yeah, I have an alt like with a level 31 character. I literally made the alt for a video. Um, and I put it on a French server. And yeah, it was like a small group of 15 running around, and I joined their comms. And yeah, it was like they went hard. I'm just gonna say that.
yeah, that'd be good to see a little
Yeah,
mix of that on North America. But yeah, talking about the restructuring beta. So ArenaNet put out all this information on what they're trying to do with the restructuring. You can look it up. It's World Restructuring Guild Wars 2. It's not too hard to find. We can put a link in the video actually. But that is being tested. There's a ton of bugs they're working out, and this past week I think was our third beta test,
yeah. I think it was a third.
and much better than the last ones for sure. A lot less bugs. The general idea is that they put a checkbox in the World vs. World screen, and you choose which one of your guilds is your quote unquote World vs. World guild that you're going to play World vs. World with. And I mean, you're allowed 5 guilds in the game, so you can have multiple different ones you play with, and one might be for fractals, for raids, whatever. But one of them you're going to have to pick, and that's going to be World vs. World guild. And so whichever one you select, that's going to be the one, or that was the one during the beta that you were placed into a world with. So it's really kind of cool. They make this temporary team just for the purpose of the beta by grouping everyone together by guilds, and they just threw them in together, shook them up, and the algorithm spit out some teams, and it's pretty cool to see how they come together, and it was a fun experience. It was kind of different fights and different interactions than you would see during your normal time.
Yeah, it was really nice to see. The I think our only in our current alliance, or the guild we have that subs for an alliance right now, is Duck the only sea time guild like that covers the yeah, the sea time.
Yes, that's yeah, that coverage of time zone is something we have to think about in World vs. Worlds. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, which was better than the last beta, I think, was we saw more coverage in other times. And it seems like the algorithm does monitor, uh, I don't know, it's probably player by player, but their active times in World versus World. So it brings together these other guilds that are more active during one guild's you know, like downtime. So it brought one guild from Japan. I don't know if they were with a different alliance, but Yeah, it was nice to see that coverage. Because the guild I referred to earlier, they run kind of small, so seeing another larger guild that runs kind of the same as us was nice to see.
Yeah, that's tough sometimes if you're on at a time when there's nobody either on your team or on the enemy team. It can be kind of dull. So
Yeah,
that's the goal for the system to kind of match people up properly so you have people to play with and against.
yeah, and I think it's a lot more successful than the previous betas and a lot less bugs. I did see a few, um, but not nearly as much as the last one.
Right, right. I really didn't experience anything myself. I heard a few people that might have got placed in the wrong world, but really minimal and much less than the last beta test.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
There is, I mean, a lot of people are worried about it, or what could it do to game mode, and my guild and this and that. There's there's going to be some people that won't like it. There's going to be, I think, a lot more people that will like it, but it's going to depend a lot on their willingness to find and engage with a guild versus just going, aimlessly into the winds.
Yeah, when you're used to playing by yourself, or alongside a bunch of other individual players, and you do lose that, I'd assume, for them at least, that would be difficult, losing that sort of uh, play style, I guess.
And I think people are misunderstanding how it's going to work a bit in that it's not like every week the teams are going to be totally shuffled. It seems more like it'll be every 2 months they'll, shake everything up and make a new team with the different guilds.
Yeah, like the rematches will still happen. It's just instead of it being, two servers getting shuffled around, it'll be groups of alliances, solo guilds, and solo players.
Right, that was another concern of people that, the individual guilds that may not have an alliance or the single players that scout around by themselves and take camps, like where will they go?
Yeah.
But they'll still be placed somewhere where they're needed and there's others to play with. And that'll happen, every 2 months or so. So you'll still have a community that builds during that time, but it's going to be based on the guilds more.
Yeah.
Yeah, was there anything big you saw during the betas? Because you play, a lot different time zones than I do.
Um
Anything big you saw as far as kind of big positive things you don't see on a normal week?
uh yeah, just what I mentioned earlier, the that Sea Time guild that ran pretty frequently. They ran like with, I think, 40, 45 people. I don't remember, but they're a pretty large guild. And, around, I think it was around this time actually, I don't see that many people playing. Um, you'll see a few small groups running around here and there, but yeah, that was really nice to see. When I saw that, I was like, okay, so I think the algorithm is um starting to pair like these guilds together better. Just because I'm seeing coverage in a lot of different time zones. Besides that, um, it was nice to see fresh, not fresh faces, but I guess fresh names since, online. Uh, yeah, like fresh names, new, different people in map chat. My guess is there may be some scouts who didn't choose a world versus world guild, so we're getting some scouts from just, random servers who are getting thrown into places by themselves, which was actually pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you're scouting and capturing camps, you can do that anywhere just the same way.
Yeah. How about you? You see anything big? Like, I don't get to see NA, so Yeah.
It was nice to see different opponent groups. A lot of times they're on the day to day, there are just these known commanders that accumulate 50 people,
Oh
and
my,
you have this
yeah.
massive squad to fight, and if you don't have quite that many people, you're struggling to come up with a plan, or build your group or find another guild to work with you. But man, during the beta, it worked out really well. Even if there were large groups, there was another guild on our team that we could kind of coordinate with, take them on. The fights were very fun and fairly evenly matched numbers wise, so it wasn't just like, you know, one team steamrolling the other one the whole time, like you can see a lot now. And
Yeah.
because that's kind of the problem. Like the servers are fossilized, and over the years, all the quote unquote good players and good guilds have gravitated towards certain servers, leaving others a wasteland with just a lot of random people and no commanders and no skill. So
Yeah.
there's no other way to fix that problem short of blowing up the servers. And that is kind of the tough position a 10-year-old game's in, but they have to make tough decisions to kind of make the gameplay continue to be fun.
Yeah, definitely a good thing. Like moving into the alliances now. Like you said, there are some guilds that will run 50 people plus, just like a group of pugs on the side and just push through a guild group of 30 or 40. And yeah, there are some times when you could fight that, but it's real hard when you're running and you run on a Wednesday and you may be the only guild on your server at that time that runs. So bring in 30 people, and then Wednesday is your opponent server, bring in 70 people, like just to W key you. It seems like the alliance system, the algorithm that they have in place is watching closely, and it sees when these groups are most active. So it may pair you better.
And one thing I don't have confirmed, but talking to the other guild leaders during the beta, it seems like they compressed North America down from 4 matchups to 3. So there were only 3 sets of 3 servers going during the beta.
Okay.
So that's another benefit of the system, is that it can kind of expand or compress depending on how many people are actually in playing at that time period.
Yeah, that's true because um you look at the server sizes, and just because you're full doesn't necessarily mean that and I'm referring to the servers that we have now, like Darkhaven, eBay, Emery Bay, and uh those. So that doesn't take into account the fact that you'll have players on your server who don't touch World versus World at all. So you could be a high or full population server and low population in World versus World at a certain time zone.
Right, right. The population doesn't really take time zone into account much. I think they've said it takes into account play hours, so they'll try to match the play hours on one server versus another.
Okay.
But that's not accounting for when they play at all, and they kind of cap servers and make them full so nobody can transfer there manually. Every Tuesday, I think they look at it and they say, "Oh, these guys have so many play hours, so many people, cap them. Nobody else can get in there."
Okay, so it's not a set number.
No, no, and it's all
Oh.
mysterious. They don't tell us what these numbers are. This is just some dev deciding no.
Okay.
But that's really looking good. I honestly was really happy with the beta. There's definitely going to be another one some point in the future where they'll have more UI stuff for the alliances between the guild leaders, so they can just click stuff and go together in.
Yeah, that's what I want to see next. Definitely I guess an alliance panel or alliance UI. Um just because I do want to see the guilds come together, not by choosing a filler guild like we've been doing and many other guilds have been doing. But yeah, to see it move from what it is now to having the alliance system, it's great.
That'll be nice to see. Yeah, a lot of guilds are still very skeptical and not wanting to do anything at all about this because they don't really think ArenaNet's going to do it. So the closer they get to actually pulling the trigger, the more people are actually going to interact with other guilds and try
Yeah.
to find people to work with versus just doing nothing and hoping for the best.
Yeah, like I understand why some guilds may want to go solo, but uh like when you're building the community, it is nice to have, you know, friend guilds who run alongside each other. You don't have to worry about um like some guilds who will kind of sit there and then run off and do something else with no communication. If you do have some sort of a rapport with the other player, I mean not the other player, the other guild, then it's easier to communicate, easier to see eye to eye with certain things. Like, oh yeah, these guys probably won't push, so uh, you can kind of expect what to do next. Yeah, so it's nice to have a community of other guilds working together as opposed to like if we went on our own and we didn't know any of the other guilds. I think that would be a little more difficult. I remember back, I think when I used to run NA, sometimes we would sidecar Dusk, and uh, Elric's a nice guy, so I'll whisper him like, "Oh yeah, so if you need any help, we'll be there," and that kind of community. I know they're not in the alliance, but um, that's like the kind of community that I'm referring to.
I really like that kind of stuff, like being able to talk to other guilds and work with them, or at least to know what you can expect with what they're gonna do, so you don't get hung out to dry.
Yeah, yeah, like there are some guilds that will like yeah, I think I just mentioned it. They'll stand around and it's like I know they won't push alongside us, so I won't even bother. And that's perfectly fine, if they're not a fight guild, I'm not going to expect them to push in and wipe their team if that's not what they want to do.
Right, right. I made that miscalculation in the beta. There was one guild that I thought would back us up. I was really fairly confident of that. So we just charged out to attack the enemy team, and nope, we were by ourselves and we died. The other guys just stayed up on the wall and watched us die. So I will not be helping that guild anymore. You know who you are. I won't call you out here, but yeah, that's kind of the state of World vs. World at the moment. And I expect to see a lot more players coming in with the Steam launch. I mean, they got to level up their characters, and World vs. World is in Endgame, so I mean, really, don't try to come in there with less than level 80 and no gear. That'll be a bad time for you. But
Yeah, like in my one of my recent videos, I stressed very much that you may want to stay away from World versus World until you hit level 80. To the new players out there, we love you. We're gonna be happy to have you, but you may not have the best time if you come in with suboptimal gear. Um, if you run alongside a group and you get picked off, they may see a core player or someone who is of lower rank and try to pull you off to the side and pin snipe you. Um, we want you to have a good time, and coming into World versus World at level 80 is probably your best bet.
definitely try to get some online resources as far as builds to get your traits set up right, and stats definitely matter. And your health needs to be at a certain level, or people can take you out in a shot or two. And man, it's a team sport. Get with some teammates, find a commander and work with them, engage, and you'll have a lot more loot and a lot more fun.
Yeah, and gonna mention this one more time. Discord. A lot of guilds run with Discord. A lot of commanders will have Discord unless they're uh, pugmanting at the time, or they just don't run with it. But if you do see a Discord link in um, the what is it? Why is it? Why am I blanking out? Uh,
Oh, the squad message.
yeah, if you see a Discord link in the squad message, you can open up the squad message, copy that, paste it into your browser, and 99% of the time, you will not have to speak. Um, they just want you to listen to the commands. It'll make your experience that much better. If they're mean to you, I'd probably just say leave. Like, yeah,
There's other maps, other commanders. Yeah, just move on.
yeah,
But yeah, that's our State of the Mist podcast. And if you guys like this content, stereotypical like and subscribe and thumbs up and bell and all that stuff. And if you have ideas for future episodes, let us know in the comments and we'll make some more.
yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks.